Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. Infinite Forbidden is the TCG's next core set, and it hits store shelves soon. It's got cool new themes and updates to existing ones, a lot of which coming from themes we've already discussed on the channel. So now's as good a time as any to revisit them and see how they fit into their themes at large. It's time for the Infinite Forbidden Release Roundup. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. Part 1. Ancient Gear. Let's start things off with a new promo that we had a lot of hopes for. It's funny actually, because we covered Ancient Gears like a day before this got announced, but let's just say it doesn't really solve anything. Ancient Gear Dragon is a level 5 Earth Machine monster with 500 attack and 2500 defense that cannot be special summoned. If you control no monsters, or all monsters you control are Earth Machines, you can normal summon this card without tributing. When your opponent activates a spell or trap card or effect, as a quick effect, you can send to the graveyard a machine monster from your hand or face up on your field, or an Ancient Gear Golem specifically from your deck to negate the effect. Now don't get me wrong, spell and trap negation is pretty good to have, but it's wrapped up in a pretty lame shell. I mean, I wouldn't want to normal summon a 500 attack monster, it'll just get run over by anything before we have a chance to use that negate. That being said, 500 is a very specific attack stat in regards to machine monsters, as this would give you a pretty good way to rank up into Cyber Dragon Infinity by way of machine duplication, except for the fact that it cannot be special summoned. Something that I thought we'd left behind with the latest wave of support. So if you want to summon this in defense position, where it can reasonably survive long enough to use its spell and trap negate, you'll need to use cards like Tanker or Catapult that ignore summoning conditions, which we already needed to summon our golems anyway, which are integral to our new support. Honestly, it's kind of a drag. Part 2. Centur-Ion. Another installment of the Calamity Lock's best friend has arrived on the scene. Previously, we got an improved synchro monster in Oxala. Now it's time to round out the cast with another crew member and the emblem that represents him. Centur-Ion Atri is a level 4 Dark Dragon Tuner monster with 1800 attack and 1400 defense, and if this card you control would be used as synchro material, you can treat it as a non-tuner monster instead. If this card is normal or special summoned, and you have an emblem card and a Centur-Ion card in your graveyard, you can draw a card. Also, you can't special summon copies of Atri for the rest of the turn. And during the main phase, if this card is treated as a continuous trap card, you can special summon it. Well, looks like we found ourselves Oxala's pilot. It comes with flexible tuner status, so it can pair with Primera to make a level 8 synchro, though the on-summon effect is a bit more difficult to pull off since you need to have an actual graveyard setup to activate it, especially since we only have 2 emblem cards, one of which is releasing in this set. But if you're able to summon this during both players' turns, something that Centur-Ion is very adept at, you've got a little draw engine that'll help you get into more hand traps to keep your plays more stable. Let me tell you, I've never been quite so excited to get my hands on this theme, though I admit a lot of it has to do with the theme having a dragon lady piloting a huge mech. It was basically laser targeted for my interests. Emblema Salvation is a quick play spell card that banishes a face-up Centur-Ion monster card from your spell and trap zone, then targets a card your opponent controls and banishes it. If this set card is destroyed or banished by an opponent's activated effect, you can place 2 Centur-Ion monsters with different names from your hand, deck, grave, and or banishment into your spell and trap zone as continuous trap cards. This is kind of like the Sprite Smashers of the theme, though the fact that it can only banish our monsters from the spell and trap zone means it's not quite as flexible, to say nothing of the fact that this card targets. It's also got that retaliation effect which deploys a lot of your Centur-Ions, but because only your opponent can trigger it, you'll very rarely see that part in action. This means its utility is largely dependent on that first effect, which is okay. Honestly, I'd pick Omega Judgment over this one any day, except for the fact that if you want to fulfill the requirements for Atri's draw, running more Salvation gives you a better chance of having an emblema in grave. And this one doesn't even come with a funny bunny rabbit logo like the last one. Are you saying we couldn't spring for like a little baby dragon image or anything? Part 3. Drytron.
You know how archetypes regularly get stripped for parts in order to create competitively viable abominations? Well, Drytron is a prime example of that. Why use Draconids or Quadrantids when you can just summon Herald of Ultimateness and scream negate every time your opponent breathes? And, considering how the new support works, the designers might have been thinking the same thing. Now, we're much more incentivized to commit to the bit, and that's something I'm very thankful for. Draconids is such a cool boss monster. Seeing it languish in the orbital platform hangar gathering dust is so sad. Drytron New 2 is a level 1 light machine monster with 2000 attack and 0 defense, and like the rest of its Drytron brethren, it can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by a card effect. But note that any card effect will suffice this time around, unlike the other Drytron modules which can only be summoned by a Drytron card's effect. If there's a Drytron card on the field, you can special summon this card from your hand or grave, but banish it when it leaves the field. And if this card is special summoned, you can add a Drytron monster from your deck to your hand, other than another copy of this card. But you can't ritual summon monsters during the turn you activate either of these effects, other than machine monsters. Now, the only machine ritual monsters currently available are our Drytron rituals, and the Magic-y rituals. And while Beto's Buster in particular can enable us to run some neat tech cards like Magic-y Unlocking for some spell and trap negation, as well as fiddling around with our opponent's attributes, the fact that New 2 restricts us to this shallow puddle of options might be cause for concern, especially if you've only ever played Herald Drytron. But rest assured, once we get into our new ritual monster, it's all gonna make sense. As for the rest of it, ooh boy, this is just what the doctor ordered. Drytron has historically lacked one-card combos, something that's basically mandatory in order to survive in the modern competitive landscape. But thanks to this, we now have one, Drytron Nova. Or heck, even 1-for-1 if you have a monster in hand to vent for it, something that we love doing. And once New 2 hits the field, it can grab you whatever module you want, which is usually going to be an Alpha Thuban, and from there you can blast off since we have the fodder to summon it already. And even if we open with New 2 in hand, all we have to do is feed it to another one of our Drytrons, then it can just climb out of the grave and get the search that way. While the banishment might seem annoying, it's actually not as bad as you might think, because we do have ways to retrieve our banished units. Namely, Ultimate Flagship Ursatron, if you're Great Big Pillock specifically, and a new card we have coming up soon. Or, you can just slap this together with another Drytron to make Mu Beta Fafnir and continue to pop off. While this card does set us up for a far different course of action, I'm very excited to see what new heights it'll help us soar to. Drytron Meteonis Alpha Draconids is a level 12 light machine ritual monster with 5,000 attack and defense, and it can be ritual summoned with Meteornis Drytron. While it's on the field, other Drytron monsters you control can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and up to twice per turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, as a quick effect, you can banish Drytron monsters from your grave whose total attack points equal or exceed the attack of the monster whose effect was activated, to negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. And if this ritual summoned card is destroyed by an opponent's card while in its owner's control, you can special summon a ritual monster with 4,000 attack from your hand or deck, and this is treated as a ritual summon. Well, we didn't have to wait long to find a replacement for our Herald setups. The destruction protection for the rest of our board is very handy. Turns out Lightning Storm is a pretty good card, so having some insurance against it and other board breakers is pretty nifty, in case you're not able to get Fafnir on board as well. And note that it protects other Drytrons, not Drytrons except Alpha Draconids. That means if you summon 2 of them, they actually protect each other. And if your opponent does manage to smash through them, it can retaliate with an original Draconids for even more disruption, although you're not going to be able to get the multi-attack effect. Funnily enough, Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon is also a valid target for this, but we're not doing Kaiba Explained right now. 5,000 attack is a bit of a hefty cost for the summon. The strength of our original ritual bosses is just 4,000, which meant we only needed to tribute 2 Drytrons. But that's where Mu Beta Fafnir comes in. Even if we reduce its attack by 1,000 to put Meteornis Drytron back into our hand, it'll have 1,000 attack, and the 2 material underneath it will have 2,000 apiece, totaling 5k. Also, notice that the negate is a soft twice per turn. So if we can put together the double alpha setup, we're talking about a total of 4 monster negates. Now, we will end up scrapping a whole bunch of our engraved Drytrons if we keep leaning on that negate, especially if our opponent's monsters are of high attack value. So make sure to pace yourself so you don't burn that dad out. Otherwise, they're going to be out a lot longer to get that milk, if you know what I mean. Meteoroa Drytron is a continuous trap card, and if any number of Drytron monsters become banished, it lets you tribute a Drytron monster and target up to 2 of your banished Drytron cards and return them to the hand. You can also reveal a copy of Meteorna's Drytron in your hand to ritual summon a machine ritual monster from your hand or grave by tributing machines from your hand or field whose total attack equals or exceeds the attack of the ritual monster. A quick effect ritual summoning effect wasn't exactly what I was expecting for Drytrons, but I'll take it. It's great for trading in an Alpha Draconids that spent all of its negates for another copy, or an original Draconids to blast away some of your opponent's monsters from the field. And, as was mentioned earlier, we are banishing our monsters a lot nowadays, so having a way to get them back into rotation is pretty good. The fact that we have to tribute a Drytron to do it though, that is a bit of a bummer. Granted, having spare material on board isn't unheard of, but it just feels clunky to pull off, so you're probably not running this card at more than 1. But that artwork is something else, let me tell you. I feel as though Alpha Draconids is going to bring in some of those steamed hams any minute now. Part 4. Gimmick Puppet. Branded players are still cranking up the salt levels of the player base to critical mass with the Nightmare Lock, so as one of the only decks that's actually able to fight back against that, Gimmick Puppets needed some bangers. And what they got in Infinite Forbidden is suitably horrifying. And not a moment too soon, because the more Gimmick Puppets annoy people, the more likely the heat is going to get taken off of Sanctifier. Gimmick Puppet Little Soldiers is a level 4 Dark Machine monster with 0 attack and defense, and if they're normal or special summoned, you can send a Gimmick Puppet monster with a different level from this card from your deck to the grave. And this card's level becomes the level of the sent monster permanently. And you can banish this card from your grave to target up to 2 Gimmick Puppet monsters you control and increase their levels by 4 each until the end of the turn. Okay, there are power creeps and then there are power spikes. Apologies for the early pun here, but in the face of Little Soldiers, Scissor Arms just doesn't make the cut anymore. Why? Well, you may think that Little Soldiers has a Foolish Burial effect, but it doesn't. It's a Cherubini. What's the difference? Well, Foolish Burial sends as part of its effect. Little Soldiers sends as part of the cost. So if the end goal is to just vent a Gimmick Puppet from your deck to the graveyard, then nothing short of actual summon negation is going to stop you. Even reviving it with its effects negated with a card like Iron Call still lets you send for cost because you can still activate the effect. And while Little Soldiers can only send level 8 monsters, no level 4 Gimmick Puppets other than, like, Terror Baby have any meaningful grave effects anyway, so it's not really worth worrying about. And if you do end up with a bunch of level 4 puppets on board, and Chimera and Gigantes Doll aren't really doing it, you can banish Little Soldiers from your grave to switch gears effortlessly. Also, for the Zexal fans among you, you might recognize this monster as that creepy little one working Giant Grinder's gears. It sure took a while for it to get its own card, but rest assured that it's definitely not a case of too little, too late. Gimmick Puppet Rouge Doll is a level 8 Dark Machine monster with 400 attack and 1400 defense, and if it's in your hand, you can reveal a Gimmick Puppet Xyz monster from your extra deck to special summon a Gimmick Puppet monster from your deck with a level equal to the rank of the revealed monster, along with this card. And if this card is sent to the grave other than from the hand, you can add this card to your hand, but you can't special summon monsters from your extra deck during the turn you activate either of this card's effects, except Gimmick Puppet monsters. There are so many decks out there that would kill for an enabler this powerful. This thing makes a rank 8 all by itself for the low price of nothing, save for puppet locking yourself out of the extra deck. Not too long ago, this would have been a massive hindrance, but these puppet locks actually don't matter anymore. You'll understand why soon enough. But what makes it even better is that if it hits the grave outside of discarding it for something like Trade-In or Bisque Doll, you get it right back so you can use it again next turn. This includes linking it off for Chimera Doll or detaching it as material from anything. Heck, send it to the graveyard with Little Soldiers or Condolence Puppet, it's not fussy. And this effect is so good that we'd even see it reproduced on another support card out of this year's Animation Chronicle. Though, we're not going to be covering Fiendish Knight today, since we're only covering cards released in the TCG, so stay tuned for next time. Also, because of its puny stat line, we can even clone it with machine duplication to unleash utter hell. It's a shame you're not able to go into any other off-theme rank 8s the turn you use any of these cards' effects, but trust me, we're not going to need them most of the time. Needless to say that this card is bloody excellent. A joke that isn't quite as funny now that the name is no longer Bloody Doll. Gimmick Puppet Cattle Scream is a level 8 Dark Machine monster with 2000 attack and defense, and you can detach a material from an Xyz monster you control to special summon this card from your hand or grave, but banish it when it leaves the field. And if a Gimmick Puppet Xyz monster has this card as material, it gains an additional effect, which lets you target a monster in your opponent's graveyard and special summon it to their field in defense position. Now we're getting the first glimpse at the deck's new game plan. The biggest problem that Gimmick Puppet has been facing for literal years now was that, while they could spam rank 8s like it's nobody's business, they're almost always restricted to using Gimmick Puppet of Strings, Giant Grinder, and Leo, and none of those are good options, especially when your opponent doesn't have any monsters. To say nothing of lacking Xyz. Strings only does anything impressive when you rank it up, Giant Grinder only deals damage when you blow up an Xyz monster with it, and Leo is, well, it's Leo. But Cattle Scream here can help these monsters do some serious damage, especially Strings. Just pick a giant monster out of your opponent's grave, detach one to put string counters on everything, then rank up into Dark Strings to wipe the board clean, while blasting a huge chunk out of your opponent's life points. Otherwise, just plop a hand trap on their field and cut them off from using Lightning Storm and Evenly Matched. The first effect isn't bad either. Most of our Xyz monsters don't use materials excessively anyway, so getting rid of one for an extra body is a great trade-off. Heck, it even helps you get closer to Disaster Leo's alternate win condition. And that banishment upon leaving the field is all but irrelevant. Just turn it into an Xyz monster. This is another slam dunk for Gimmick Puppet support, and frankly, I could go on about it until the cows come home. Gimmick Puppet Fantasix Machinix is a rank 8 Dark Machine Xyz monster with 1500 attack and 3100 defense, requiring any 2 level 8 monsters as material. You can detach a material from this card to add a rank up magic spell from your deck to your hand, and you can also normal summon a machine monster in addition to your regular normal summoner set during your main phase this turn. And if you special summon a Gimmick Puppet Xyz monster, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your graveyard to either field in defense position, then you can add a rank up magic spell from your graveyard to your hand. There is no doubt about it, this card is a menace, and it's not even the card's final form. As I alluded to previously, our biggest plays come from ranking up our monsters, and having an on-theme way to get our rank up magics quickly is blood-curdling, to say the least. Targets include Barion's Force, which we can use to swipe a material from an opposing Xyz monster, Numeron Force to blank the effect of everything else on the field, and Quick Chaos to push for some extra damage during the battle phase. Though Numeron and Quick Chaos can only rank up our number monsters, so Fantasix is sadly not a valid target for him. But most of the time, the go-to is going to be Argent Chaos Force for its busted recycling effect. And speaking of Argent Chaos Force, Fantasix's second effect basically mimics that card's own recycling effect, meaning that no matter which rank up magic you use, your Chaos Xyz monsters are never too hard to get to. And this even summons itself back, either to your own field to give you an extra body for rank up or link plays like Chimera Doll, or to your opponent's field so that Giant Grinder or Giant Hunter can shave some extra life points off of your opponent. And let's just say that this isn't the only way you'll be doing any of this. And the extra normal summon is deceptively scary. While we're not likely to use that on any of our level 8 monsters anytime soon, Terror Baby and Humpty Dumpty are great for setting up extra Xyz plays or Chimera Doll. So rest assured that your opponent's far from safe. Gimmick Puppets have been desperate for a decent rank 8 since their introduction, and after all this time, this one is a Fantasix addition. Quattro would be proud. Chaos Xyz Gimmick Puppet Fanatix Machinix is a rank 9 Dark Machine Xyz monster with 3100 attack and 1500 defense, requiring 3 level 9 monsters as material. And if it's special summoned, you can add a Puppet Trap card from your deck to your hand. You can detach a material from this card to special summon a monster from either player's grave to your opponent's field in defense position, and if a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field, except during the damage step, you can target one of those monsters, destroy it, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to half of its original attack. Right on cue. Here's that ranked up version of Fantastics I was hinting at earlier, and it fits right in with the rest of the Gimmick Puppet Xyz monsters, which are purely focused on board breaking and burn damage. Unlike the others though, this reacts to stuff being summoned on your opponent's field, no matter whose turn it is. This gives Gimmick Puppet some long overdue interaction during your opponent's turn, because even though generic rank 8s were available for this, the Puppet lock kept us out of it. And let me tell you, while destroying cards may be a little passe, there are far worse ways of popping our opponent's monsters, especially since this gets us closer to winning in time. The trap search is pretty nice as well, even if we only have 2 targets at time of recording. One is Puppet Parade, which is rather middling in most cases, but can make for a strong comeback tool if you're in a pinch. And the second will come up in a bit. The main event for Fanatics is the Grave Summon though. The philosophy remains the same as it was with Cattle Scream. It gives your opponent something to aim at with your pop and burn effects. But unlike Cattle Scream, Fanatics Machina lets you give your opponent your own monsters, including Xyz. So if you give them a massive Xyz monster like Strings or Leo, and then make Giant Grinder, you can erase almost half of their starting life total in a single shot. And if you're able to pull that off more than once, then the possibility for an FTK is firmly on the table. And, as much as it pains me to say it, it's not going to be hard to do this. Like, at all. But no matter your stance on FTKs, this is a great end board monster that I'm sure that fanatics of the deck are ecstatic to play. Mansion of the Dreadful Dolls is a field spell card that, when activated, adds a Gimmick Puppet monster from your deck to your hand. Gimmick Puppet monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle and are unaffected by your opponent's activated non-Xyz monster effects. And once per turn, you can attach an Xyz material from your monster and target a Gimmick Puppet monster in your grave and special summon it to your opponent's field in defense position. This is the most pivotal card in this entire batch of Legacy support, without a doubt. The Monster Search is a godsend for a deck that didn't have one prior, or at least a search that wasn't tied to a link to. The third effect that gives your opponent a monster for us to blow up and gets closer to that vaunted FTK is also nifty, and even detaches a material to help speed Disaster Leo along a little, giving us another avenue to win us the game in one fell swoop. But the blanket protection effect that turns all of our monsters into copies of Infinitrack Fortress Megaclops is, brutal, to say the least. All of our combos can do huge damage pretty easily, but they're inherently susceptible to a lot of the game's hand traps. But if you have this card on board, the only one that can stop anything on your field is Infinite Impermanence, and God help your opponent if you also used Bisque Doll's effect in Graveyard to protect your monsters from targeting. Now, this card does have weaknesses. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit can make short work out of it when you try to use the Detach to Summon effect, for example, and Mansion doesn't protect your Gimmick Puppets in grave or in your hand from non-Xyz effects. But then again, that's what Terror Baby is here for. And because this card can start a combo that can deal at least 8,000 damage by itself, without having to run any troublesome Garnets, don't be surprised to see some hits to Giant Grinder or Argent Chaos Force in the future. Until then, you're just gonna have to deal with those puppets inviting you in with those big dumb grins, knowing they're about to knock you out of a regional run without you ever having a turn. Yuck. Service Puppet Play is a normal trap card that targets monsters your opponent controls up to the number of Gimmick Puppet Xyz monsters you control, and you take control of them until the end phase. And if you control a Gimmick Puppet Xyz monster, except the turn this card was sent to the grave, you can banish this card from your grave and target an Xyz monster in either grave and special summon it to either field in defense position. This is probably what you're going to be searching off of Fanatics Machinex in 9 out of 10 situations. But that's not without good reason. By having 1 Xyz in the extra monster zone and 2 more in your main monster zone, you can steal as many as 3 monsters with this, and that makes for a devastating piece of interruption, even if it is only temporary. Combine this with Fantastic's monster popping effect to destroy any monster your opponent follows up with, and they'll have to have a godlike hand to come back from it. Not to mention the Graveyard effect can be pretty handy too, giving some of your Xyz monsters a second chance at getting ranked up, or getting turned into fodder for Giant Grinder. The turn delay is a little frustrating, but we don't need to make FTKs even easier now, do we? The designers certainly wouldn't be doing a game a service by doing so. Part 5, Ice Barrier. There were a lot of dual terminal related support cards that came out in this set, hence the name Terminal Revenge. And I'm still very mad that this wasn't made into its own special lore set, but we won't be covering them in today's episode. We've actually already done so with the 2023 release roundup, back when we used to do these things yearly. Can you imagine? But a promo card for Ice Barriers did slip through the cracks, so we're going to be talking about it for a little bit right now, which gives me a chance to bring up more lore. And I'm not going to pass up the opportunity to talk about more lore. Brionac, the magical ice dragon, is a level 6 water sea serpent synchro monster with 2300 attack and 1400 defense, requiring generic material. If this card is synchro summoned, you can discard a card, then target a card on the field and return it to the hand. And if this card is special summoned from the grave, you can discard a card, then target a card on the field and return it to the hand. So it's another Brionac that isn't quite as powerful as the original, but does have its own use cases. Because Magical Ice Dragon is an on-summon trigger, your opponent won't be able to remove it from the field before you activate the effect, which is a weakness that the original Brionac has. And honestly, if you only plan to bounce a single card with the effect of Brio anyway, there isn't much a difference between the two cards. So I feel like this is actually the much better version between the two in most cases. And because we've already gotten an upgraded version of Trishula, it's only a matter of time before Gungnir follows suit. Though I am worried about timeline shenanigans. The more often we buff the Ice Dragons, the better the Evil Swarm versions get, and we just barely skirted past those things. Part 6, Madolche. One of my old favorite standby decks is back on the menu. Madolches have been capable of picking apart boards and dealing lethal damage out of nowhere ever since Queen Tiramisu was released. Will the next addition to the royal line continue their legacy? Madolche Queen Tiara Frace is a rank 5 Earth Fairy Xyz monster with 2600 attack and 2500 defense, requiring 3 level 5 Madolche monsters as material. But once per turn, you can Xyz summon copies of this card using Queen Tiramisu as material. And once per opponent's turn, as a quick effect, you can detach a material from this card, then target up to 2 Madolche cards in your graveyard. Shuffle them into the deck. Also, shuffle cards your opponent controls into the deck, up to the number of cards returned. And if this card in your possession is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, return this card to the extra deck, which makes it the first one of our extra deck monsters to adopt the main deck Madolche effect, which is grand because now you only really need to run a single copy of this, and potentially means you can also just run one copy of original Tiramisu, since you can immediately get it back into your extra deck after detaching it as material for that removal effect. Speaking of which though, yeah, this is just original Tiramisu's effect as a quick effect, which is awesome. We're really good at going second and uprooting an opponent's board, but as far as interaction on our opponent's turn goes, we have, Promenade? And because original Tiramisu's removal effect is good by today's standards, having it as a quick effect during our opponent's turn is outrageous. It is an effect the deck has desperately needed, and, not to mention, has been ordered by the Queen for years now, and it's good that we finally caved on it. One more denial, and that would have been the last strawberry. Madolche Mini Meowcaroons is a Link 3 Earth Beast monster with 2300 attack, requiring 2 or more effect monsters, including a Madolche monster, as material. If this card is Link summoned, you can add a Madolche card from your deck to your hand. Also, you can target a monster in your grave to special summon a Madolche monster from your hand and shuffle that target into the deck, but you can't activate non-Madolche monster effects for the rest of the turn. And that's actually unfortunate that we're archetype locking our effects because we've just recently added Vernisylphs as a support engine. I mean, they're basically honorary Madolches themselves considering all the stuff they do for the theme. But thankfully, the restriction here probably isn't that bad. It only summons from the hand, so you already need to have a really good setup to even use that effect in the first place, though since you search a Madolche when you link summon this, you have the choice to have a target in your hand for this. Regardless, you can pretty easily wait until the end of your turn to use this, so your other effects will be just fine. See, the thing that really bugs me is that it's a Link 3. See, before Meowcaroons, Fresh Sistart was our primary Link monster. It protects our spells and traps, which is huge considering how many we rely on. From Chateau to Ticket to Salon, they really are doing the heavy lifting here. The problem is, it has to point to a Madolche monster to apply that continuous effect, and with only 2 downward pointing diagonal arrows, it has to be in the extra monster zone to apply that effect. But with Meowcaroons having the material requirement that it does, it's practically built to be made with Sistart. If you reborn Sistart with some other effect and put it in the main monster zone, it's basically worthless. So what you have to do is make a different link to under Sistart and then link that away with a Madolche. Preferably an Earth link too, since you've probably locked yourself out of any other attributes effects thanks to Vernisylphs, which isn't unfounded but does take up a lot of our bandwidth. It's not unplayable, far from it, but I'm just saying, if this was a Link 1, I'm pretty sure it would be the cat's pajamas. Madolche Dessert is a normal trap card that targets 2 effect monsters on the field, including a Madolche monster. Return those effect monsters to the hand or extra deck, then you can special summon a Madolche monster from your hand or extra deck with attack less than or equal to the returned monster's original attack. If any number of Madolche cards in your graveyard are returned to the deck and or extra decks while this card is in your grave, except during the damage step, you can attach this card to an Xyz monster you control as Xyz material. But you can only use 1 effect of this card per turn, and only once per turn. So Promenade acts as our negation, while Dessert is actual, factual removal, and even replaces the Madolche you return for another monster, which could be the monster that you bounced back to hand, which might then trigger any on-special summon effects, or a monster from your extra deck if you are so inclined. Sadly, you're not able to summon directly from the deck, which would have been really cool, but at this point, it's largely a way to summon out a Sistart for free. It's got low attack, so you can get it right into the EMZ, hopefully pointing to a Madolche, and then, once Dessert's in the graveyard, it can start recharging your Madolche Xyz monster's effects. And because none of this banishes Dessert, you can shuffle it back into your deck with effects like the Queens to reset it with Salon. It's really good, and it involves playing with a bunch of tiny cats. This card is perfect. Part 7. Memento. The Progression Poles archetype has been getting some pretty big buffs, hasn't it? And I'm all here for it. This deck lacked direction on release, focusing primarily on a large, though underwhelming, boss monster. But with the introduction of some fusion nonsense and Legacy of Destruction, it's now better equipped for grindier games. And these new cards from Infinite Forbidden don't just lean into this, they tip the whole damn house over while they're doing so. Mementotlin Sleepy is a level 3 Earth Beast monster with 800 attack and 1000 defense, and is based on, you might have guessed it, Mystical Sheep number 2. Even though it was Mystical Sheep number 1 that has that old school fusion replacement effect, but that would have ruined the whole normal monster retrain motif. If any number of monsters in your possession were destroyed by a card effect this turn, as a quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is normal or special summoned, you can fusion summon a Memento fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or field as material. And if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can send a Memento card from your deck to the grave, except another copy of this card. This is yet another home run for this deck build theme. One thing that Memento was severely lacking was extenders, and Sleepy does a great job of filling that role. Granted, you will need to have destroyed a monster by an effect to get that online, but assuming that your opponent doesn't slap you with a hand trap every time you try to do anything, that's going to be pretty easy. And heck, if you're going second, you might even be able to pivot through some interaction, especially if your starter gets popped. But the standout effect here is the one that lets you fusion summon when it hits board. Mementotlin Fusion is a really good card, but the biggest pitfall is that the fusion effect is a hard once per turn. So when we inevitably end up getting a second Memento Fusion monster up, whenever that will be, you're going to be hit by the dilemma of either making Twin Dragon or this new fusion, which would have been a real downer. But thanks to Sleepy's effect, we almost never have to make that choice. And that's just as well, because our new fusion is a sight to behold. I guess I spoiled the surprise there. Unlike Mementotlin Fusion, Sleepy can even be used during the battle phase. So if your combined creation somehow isn't going to be able to deal enough damage to win you the game, you can throw this down and perform one more fusion summon to finish your opponent off. And if all that falls through, somehow, it can even take another card from our deck and dump it into the grave when it gets destroyed, even if it happens from the hand via Bone Party, or via battle if you're in that much of a bind. And Gaddock is always a great choice to send with that effect. It's not entirely clear how much of an impact that Memento will have on the competitive scene with this new support, but if it makes a big splash, you can definitely expect to see a few mystical meta sheep. Memento Mictlan Takutlika Combined Conqueror is a level 9 illusion fusion monster with 3000 attack and 2000 defense, requiring 3 Memento monsters as material. If it's fusion summoned, you can send 3 Memento cards from your deck and or extra deck to the grave, and as a quick effect, you can target an equal number of Memento monsters you control and cards your opponent controls and destroy them, but those two effects cannot be activated in the same chain. You can also banish this card from your grave to add a copy of Memento Mictlan from your deck to your hand. Now this is a payoff. Some of you might remember how Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer basically warped the format around it for a year or two, and while it's not quite as flexible or impactful as Astra Phoenix's latest piece of heinous support, Combined Conqueror is basically our off-brand version. But what we lack in non-targeting destruction and almost infinite revival, we make up for in raw power, letting us turn any amount of mementos that we have and trading them in for opponents' cards at any time. Heck, you could potentially pop even more cards on top of that if you destroyed Mementotlin Horned Dragon with this effect. I cannot tell you just how proud I am that my little boy is out there doing war crimes on the dueling field. And if Conqueror ends up in the grave, either by its own effect or some other way, we can just bring it back with Combined Creation's revival effect later. So you can bet that it's not going to stay down for long. Or we can simply banish it to get a hold of Memento Mictlan for some extra floats and spell and trap recursion. Not to mention that no longer having to use Mementotlin Fusion's grave effect to search that field spell is greatly appreciated. Lastly, we have the effect that triggers on Fusion Summon. Now, I'm not sure whether the person who decided to staple an on-theme painful choice to this was mad or a genius, but there is a fine line there, so who can tell? The material cost to summon this card is normally a bit strenuous, but if we've destroyed a monster by an effect this turn, Mementotlin Fusion lets us use monsters in our grave as material by shuffling them back into the deck, so it's not that bad. And you'll be rewarded for this by instantly replacing those cards back into the grave from your deck and or extra deck. Or, if we summon this card via Sleepy, that effect can get us all the way towards Combined Creation Summon. But we can do even more than that. For example, throw Gaddock and an on-theme card that you need into the graveyard, and Gaddock will jump right out of the grave because it was sent there by a Memento monster's effect. Then, you can add the sent card back to your hand. This effect also lets you send cards from your extra deck to the graveyard without excluding other copies of Conqueror. So we can dump another copy of this, then immediately banish it to grab Memento Mictlan. This effect does make Combined Conqueror the strongest Ash Magnet known to man, but here's a tip for you: summon it under Cross Sheep. And as long as you have a level 4 or lower monster engraved to summon, Ash won't be able to stop you if you order your chains correctly. Gaddock was a great start, Twin Dragon gives us direction, but this is the game changer for Memento, make no mistake. And I can say, with some confidence, that it's dramatically increased the deck's chances of conquering the competitive scene. Part 8. Ragnaraika. Why does it reference Ragnarok? We already have 3 Norse themes. Yeah, you can tell I'm not jazzed about the localized name of the theme. Nor am I happy that my wonderfully crafted Crytypes hasn't been adopted by the Yu-Gi-Oh community. And you know what? It's my video, so I'm gonna keep calling them that to refer to plant, insect, and reptile monsters. Yeah, and I guess they've got some new cards too. Let's take a look at those. Ragnaraika Butterfly Lady is a level 4 Earth Insect monster with 1800 attack and 0 defense, and you can discard this card to special summon any Cry-type monster from your hand. And if it's banished from the field or grave, you can activate this effect. During the end phase, draw cards equal to the number of different monster types of Cry-types that you control. So basically, this gives Evil Seed's alternate summoning condition to the rest of the theme, meaning that committing to your normal summon becomes a lot less risky than it used to be. And Lady is nice enough to extend that benefit to all Cry-types as well. But especially insect decks. Lord knows what bee troopers are capable of with only a single summon. Imagine what happens when they get more. The downside with this effect is that it's a monster effect that activates in the hand, which isn't terrible on its own, though it is the kind of thing that Chain Coils locks you out of if your opponent activates their own effect in hand as well. Thankfully, Lady's effect is not a quick effect, so that interaction between the two of them won't come up very often, but it is a possibility, one that I am surprised made it through to the final product. The Banished effect, though, that's a real bop, I'm not gonna lie. Remember that all of the Ragnaraika Link monsters have a Grave effect that lets you revive them by taking a Cry-type monster you control and tucking it under your deck. This means that your hand in Grave may very well be depleted after you climb all the way up to Stag Sovereign, on top of bringing back previous rungs of the Link ladder. But if you banish this card along the way, you can seamlessly refill your grip once you're done. And this is very easy to assemble. Just use Evil Seed's effect to add it, then immediately banish it, preferably alongside a copy of Samurai Beetle to help start your Link climb. You're even free to shuffle back the lady with Samurai Beetle for its own special summon because the draw effect has already been activated and won't need to stay banished to resolve later. You could say it's one of the Raika engine's biggest draws. Ragnaraika Tortoise Tyrant is a Link 3 water reptile monster with 2600 attack, requiring 2 or more Cry-type monsters as material. You can banish up to 2 monsters from your grave and target the same number of spell and trap cards your opponent controls and destroy them, and like the other Ragnaraika Links, you can special summon this card from your grave by placing a Cry-type that you control on the bottom of the deck. You cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except Cry-types. This one's a bit of an oddball. There isn't much reason to go into this over Mantis Mug during your initial Link climb, aside from maybe navigating reptile locks if your deck is Ogdoadic flavored. And unlike every Link monster aside from Stag Sovereign, which only needs a minimum of 1 Cry-type monster each, Tortoise Tyrant demands that all materials used are Cry-types. Now, that's not going to be very hard, especially in a deck focused entirely on those types, but it can be a bummer if you're forced to put some hand traps on board to extend. That's not to say that this card is bad though. The back row removal is useful, especially for blasting infuriating floodgates right off the face of the earth. And good news, while it can only be summoned using Cry-types, it's less fussy about what you have to feed to its removal effect, so you can even turn spent hand traps into Mystical Space Typhoons. While not an ideal choice for Link climbing, it does provide some much needed utility for the theme. It's just a shame we can't have beast monsters roped into all of this, because we'll never see how this tortoise compares to the hare. Part 9. Signer Dragons. And now, it's time for the mandatory 5D support. This time, we've got a reference to Yusei's Synchro Summon Chant, Gathering Light, a continuous spell card that lets you banish a monster you control and a synchro monster in your grave that is a power tool monster or a level 7 or 8 dragon monster, then target a card your opponent controls and destroy it. Level 7 or higher synchro monsters you control gain 400 attack for each of your banished level 7 or higher synchro monsters, and once per turn, when an opponent's monster declares an attack while you have a banished synchro monster, you can negate the attack. This comes from the manga version of 5Ds, and it's pretty funny. It's got removal, a pretty nifty attack boost, and even gives you a way to ward off your opponent's attacks. But don't expect this to fix any problems with your deck. It doesn't search you anything, and nothing searches it, so we can't count on it being a part of our end boards. And our big dragons are already pretty big. An extra 400 or 800 boost isn't going to change much. The card may be gathering light, but in reality, it's not really going to do much but gather dust. Part 10. Tenpai. If you thought the Battle Phase Turbo deck was annoying before, you might want to skip over to the next section, because things are not getting any better. Or rather, the issue is that they're getting a lot better. Tenpai Dragon Genroku is a level 3 fire dragon monster with 0 attack and 1000 defense, and if this card is added to your hand, except by drawing it, you can special summon it as a tuner. Then you can increase its level by 1. As a quick effect, you can tribute this card to special summon a Tenpai Dragon monster from your deck, except a copy of this card. Also, you can't special summon monsters for the rest of the turn, except dragon monsters. Ooh, boy, where do I even begin with this? So this gets special summoned for free if we add it from the deck to the hand with our field spell, as well as with Sangen Kaiman, even outside of the battle phase. It's another tuner that can supplement Chandra, although it can also maintain its level 3 status when it becomes a tuner, giving you access to synchros you otherwise wouldn't be able to get to. but it can also just act as any member of the Tenpai team, giving you more copies of Pydra to search for the field spell, then you can proceed to pop off from there. Because, you know, that's what the deck needed, more ways to find its brutally efficient win condition. It's so good that it's practically cheating. In fact, it turns out that Genroku is a technique for cheating in Mahjong. Judge? Songen Kaiho is a normal trap card that you can activate during the main phase, if all monsters you control are fire dragons, minimum 1, and your opponent controls more monsters than you do. And it ends that main phase. And if 3 or more attacks have been declared this turn, you can banish this card from your grave to draw a card, then you can special summon any number of Tenpai dragon monsters from your hand. So if you have all of the Songen spells you need, Pydra can grab Kaiho instead of those, and this is a pretty devastating move when going first. If you can end turn on a way to quicksync into Songenpai Transcend Dragion, then when your opponent is forced to end their main phase and go into the battle phase, they'll have to attack into your big monster with any that they have on board, no matter if they've summoned their monsters in attack or defense position, because Songenpai forces every monster on the field into attack position when synchro summoned. Even if you're conservative with your summons to prevent yourself from self-TKing, if the Tenpai Dragon player sees any opportunity to cause you to lose a key monster by making them run headfirst into Kinky Dora's gay cousin, they're going to take it. And at the very least, Kaiko can be used to force a battle phase before a big enough offensive has been established to keep an OTK at bay. And if that wasn't enough, its Engrave effect amplifies your attack 3 times strategy by drawing you a card, then dumping every Tenpai dragon in your hand onto the field, potentially triggering more effects and adding even more damage to your push. Seriously, if Mahjong is as cutthroat and vicious as this is, I think I might need to pick up some tiles. This game seems rad. Part 11. Vaalmonica. This theme has been seeing a bit of a resurgence since it got its digital printing in Master Duel. It's certainly very good at turboing out level 4 monsters, and its bosses are no joke. It even has some of the support we talked about last time to help smooth things along, which has got to be one of my favorite features of how Master Duel handles its releases. But now it's time to see what happens when you push the theme even further. Varar, Vaalmonican Concord, is a Link 2 water spellcaster monster with 3000 attack, requiring any 2 monsters, including a Vaalmonica Link monster, as material. It's unaffected by all non-Vaalmonica card effects while 6 or more resonance counters are on your field, and it gains an additional attack during each battle phase for each level 4 Vaalmonica monster you control. And once per turn, when your opponent would special summon any number of monsters as a quick effect, you can negate the summon, and if you do, destroy those monsters, then remove 3 resonance counters from your field. That's right, we're in Towers territory. 6 resonance counters sounds like a lot, but since each scale needs at least 3 to summon the Vaalmonica Link monster that makes a part of this monster's material, you're guaranteed to be halfway there, if not all the way there. The multi-attack isn't restricted to monsters too, so one good pendulum summon to turbo out a bunch of on-theme monsters weaponizes this something fierce. And it's got inherent summon negation on top of that, helpful in just about everything, especially the mirror match. This is the big boss that the deck is going to be revolving around for some time. And for how much you have to put in to accumulate resonance counters, it better be. Though, with an immunity taken from Apocalyphort Towers, a multi-attack taken from Scareclaw Triheart, and a summon negate taken from El Shaddai Garista, this is starting to sound a lot like a case of Stolen Valor. Which, once again, a lot less funny now that we have the official name. Konami, can you at least have the decency to wait until after the roundups to release the official name? At least people will get a kick out of me getting all the names wrong. Vaalmonica Creation is a continuous trap card that gives all Vaalmonica Link monsters you control a 1200 attack boost while there are 6 or more resonance counters on your side of the field. If your opponent special summons any number of monsters, you can, except during the damage step, immediately after this effect resolves, Link summon a Vaalmonica Link monster. And if this card is sent from the hand or field to the graveyard, you can place a resonance counter on one card in your pendulum zone that you can place a resonance counter on until it has 3 resonance counters. Oh, wow, cool, so it just fully charges one of your pentascales without having to go through the process of building them up the old-fashioned way. Which isn't really old-fashioned, but you know what I mean. So what you can do is go all the way on one half, either gaining life points or taking damage to charge up one scale, and then have Creation charge up the other half. And that way, you'll have the 6 resonance counters you need for a full power Verer before you know it. and sending Creator from the hand to the grave is going to be pretty easy since your pendulum scales will do it for you in the process of completing said scales. And while it sticks around on the field, it's just as dangerous. The attack boost is pretty nasty, especially with Verer's multi-attack, but the quick link is what's the most worrying. The Vaalmonica field spell has a nasty habit of stealing monsters, but if you do it during your opponent's turn, it amounts to little more than some cheeky disruption, like an enemy controller used to stop your opponent from activating a certain monster's effects. But because the Link 1 Vaalmonicas can use any effect monster as long as you have enough of the appropriate resonance counters, Creator converts it into more permanent removal, or should I say, the start of more permanent removal. With Duralume being an option, the opponent could be facing down 3 more pops at least. And we can search this a number of different ways, using either Celta or Celatrice. And all of this destructive might generated from a little girl practicing chopsticks on the harpsichord. The power of imagination is super busted, folks. I think Celatrice and Nemlyria have to form an alliance. Those two would be unstoppable. Part 12. Voiceless Voice. We are never gonna agree where Voiceless Voice lands on the usability scale, huh? Overshadowed by Snake Eye or overhyped Omni-Negate? I don't think we'll ever come to a consensus, but regardless, more support shall still be released, and we can't do a darn thing to stop it. Guardian of the Voiceless Voice is a continuous trap card, and if a non-ritual monster you control is destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can special summon a Skull Guardian from your hand or deck. You can also send this card from the spell and trap zone face up to the graveyard, then target a ritual monster that you control, giving it attack equal to the total original attack of all other monsters currently on the field until the end of the turn, but you cannot activate both effects on the same chain. Yeah, you heard it here, it doesn't summon the new Skull Guardian. This card is trying to get you to play the original Skull Guardian. They want you to risk bricking on a vanilla ritual monster, all for the chance to summon it for free al dente? With those abysmal stats? And the other effect isn't that impressive either. It's basically honest for every other monster on the field. And yeah, that can turn into a win, but your opponent is going to have to super commit to the board and not interrupt your big push. And I just don't think anyone is going to let you get away with that. How did such a promising theme drop the ball like this? Even Vaalmonica got something that upped their ceiling. And we're still waiting on that Skull Guardian reprint, Konami. Part 13, Yubel. Last, but certainly not least, is the most anticipated card out of Terminal Revenge, as well as an update to the up-and-coming Fiend Link deck that will also see play in a number of different decks moving forward. Phantom of Yubel is a level 9 Dark Fiend fusion monster with 0 attack and defense, requiring a Yubel monster and a Fiend with 0 attack and defense as material, and must be special summoned from the extra deck by shuffling the above cards from your hand, field, and or grave into your deck or extra deck. It can't be used as fusion material, can't be destroyed by battle, also you take no battle damage from battles involving this card. And when your opponent activates a monster effect as a quick effect, you can tribute this card, so the activated effect becomes your opponent destroys a Yubel monster in their hand, deck, or on their field. You know how we used to joke sometimes that Contact Fusion was just early Link summoning? Well, now we have the Link Zero version of that. Being able to recycle materials from basically everywhere makes this an easy include in any of the Fiend Link or Yubel combo decks, giving you some pseudo-monster negation that enables more Yubel shenanigans. It's so simple to pull off that even decks that have nothing to do with Yubel are splashing them in just to use this. All you have to do is play some Nightmare Thrones, and whenever you activate it, you have a number of different ways to get a Yubel monster and a 0/0 Fiend into the graveyard, and then bada boom, you got Phantom. It's kind of heinous, I'm not gonna lie. And if this is the kind of card design we can expect from Legacy themes moving forward, and if they keep getting printed at Chase Rarities, you can expect these kinds of cards to cost you an arm and your immortal soul. And that just about covers all the updates for archetypes that we've already covered as of the release of the Infinite Forbidden Core set. While the new Exodia cards are pretty cool, we're not going to be doing an episode on them quite yet. We'll be keeping those in reserve for when we do Yugi Explained at 100k subscribers. So I can't think of a better time to ask that if you like what I do here and want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and leave a like. All of those go a long way towards helping the video do well, and you'll have my eternal gratitude. And now that that's out of the way, which of the new support out there are you most excited to see? Are you like me and you can't wait to brew with Madolche, or has some other archetype caught your eye? Let me know down below, because I'm gonna need as much reading material as possible to distract me from what the new TCG exclusive theme could possibly be. I mean, if we get the third wave of Ashen support, I am gonna lose my damn mind. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the lovely people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. Today's episode is also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders, Simic Toadstool and Upstairs Media, Nebula Navigators 3rd Dynasty, 50 Gigabytes, Ada Basilisk, Adams Ajdel, Owexitowa Yume, Anansi Dragon, Ancient Wizard, Andrew Newman, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Comrade Copperbottom, Emony Chan, Eric, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Groog, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Mega Combi, Millennia Asta, Mern, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, RL Man, Sammy Haim, Scott 48, Serenity Towns, Skybuster Leo, The Phantom Knights of Shitted Pants, The Critic of Innocence, Thievery Coast and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders, A Random Pup, Ariel Kersey, Baden Von Titty Sprinkles, Beelzephyr, Burnag, Blitzwolf, Borger with a Shotgun, Chaz Ghost, Childish Lamar, Dr. Reaper, R.I.P., Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Ignis Heat the True Draco Slayer, Inblink, Jester Designs, Kale the Dragon, Kevon Public, Lemon Yu-Gi-Oh, Lobomaru 02, Manga Pages, Matt Simmons, McSpoofy, Michael Shimabukuro, Michael Sharp, Nitromo, Nix, Obsidian, Ryan Simon, Shizuka Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, Terror Top to 3, The Legendary Raven, The Pokemon 52, Tiger X2476, Visor KG, Zaldreka and Zalus, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, and be a part of these credits, along with other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you would check out the link to my Patreon in the description, or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you want to catch up on all the themes mentioned in this video, I've got a playlist of them for you right here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. But with Meowcaroons having a material requirement like it does, it's practically built to be made with Sistart. And that line was ruined because Moby hit the box that covers my mic, turning it completely away, completely ruining the audio. Once again, sterling help, Moby. You are my favorite little baby. Madolche Queen Tiara Frace is a rank 5 Earth Fairy Xyz monster with 2600 attack and 2500 defense. Once again, Moby. Sterling work. Oh my god. I think his tail's whipping everywhere. It's moving all kinds of stuff. And take control of them until the end phase. Nope, stop it.